morning. The program is Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. And we certainly have a perspective, and we do have a personality this morning. Not very well known in the Tri-County area, but he's getting his legs up. Give him a couple more years in the job, and he'll be well acquainted throughout the Tri-County area. First thing we do, Judith K., is kudos. The Mount Pulaski Courthouse Foundation folks are having a big gala over there this Saturday evening. This Saturday, folks, at the American Legion Hall. They're on the south side of Mount Pulaski. Great cause. Those folks have taken the bit and got the horse under control. And by golly, they're going to raise $1 million over there.
I have no doubt.
That's almost hard to fathom, a small community like that coming together. But they're going to save that venerable old courthouse, and save it they will. Personal note, if I may, there are a lot of heavy hearts in Bloomington and Lincoln today. Every once in a while you see a young fella come along, or a young lady, as the case may be, who is an adult, and you look at him and inside him you say, boy, there's somebody special. And that was true with Jason Jones. He was somebody special.
Well, and our thoughts and prayers are certainly with his family.
Yeah.
Most definitely. That's an awful thing to have happen. I learned this morning that tower at Bloomington, the control tower, shuts down at 10 in the evening, and they said that's very standard.
Oh, yeah, and
the towers shut down. I didn't know towers ever closed. I thought it was like hospital and prison. They just went 24/7.
Well, the tower never shuts down at Burtonville International out there at Richard Martin's place. That never shuts down.
So there.
So let's get right into business this morning. I just felt I had to make that comment.
That was appropriate. Thank you.
Go ahead and introduce our guest.
Well, I'd like first to thank both of the people who came out to vote yesterday. I dare say that if it had been two teams for push me, pull me or something, the judges would have won, because I think there were more judges, election judges, than there were people coming through the door to vote. It was just sad. So much of it had to do with school board elections, and of course there was no contest because people don't want to serve in those capacities. There's certainly no money in it, and there is grief in it. I'll grant that, but those schools are teaching the people that are going to run our nursing homes, which Bill and I are
what do you judges
going to have to shop for.
Oh, I'm going to shop all around. As a matter of fact, I met a young nurse down there.
Don't tell everything now.
Well, yeah, right on the air. I can tell about this. Had my picture taken with her with a selfie and all that business. Went down to the honor flight last night again. John, sometime, if you ever have time, just take about 3 hours out of your. Well, they're going to take longer than that. But go home and go down there to Springfield and welcome these guys home. They had about 90. Not many World War II boys left. We're getting out of here. A lot of Korean veterans and a few Vietnam veterans, which I'm happy to see get recognized. But there were people coming from all over, and that's what brought it to mind. This young lady is don't want to meet her professionally, I'll tell you that. She's a cancer nurse over in Peoria. New student just off the campus over there at Methodist, I believe. Had her family, with 10 of them there to welcome an old guy home. And you know how it happened, to sit down and start visiting with people. And I found out what she does, and bright young lady, or just as bright as could be. And there was another family came down in 2 cars. I don't know how that happened, all the way from Chicago. And they brought the young ladies down who were the queens. And they had the tiaras and the sashes and the whole 9 yards. And I thought that was impressive. People come all the way from Chicago down to welcome these guys home. Now, I don't know who invited them or what prompted that there, but nonetheless, they made that to and fro trip.
and that's a long trip late at night.
Oh, yeah.
Betcha.
Yeah. It's hard.
I don't know whether the question that you had in your little presentation there was rhetorical or not, but I'd like to help answer it.
All right.
You did mention that you know how, when you go someplace, you sit down and talk to people. And yes, in answer to your question, I know how, when you go someplace, you sit down and talk to people. I just want to make that abundantly clear.
Well, let's
Every time.
let's talk about Logan County's backbone. Notwithstanding our fine factories that we have here, the backbone is...
Well, agriculture, definitely. In
All right.
fact,
Afraid she wasn't going to take the bait for a minute, John.
no, I'm not as dumb as I look.
Jury's out.
I remember years ago, John Fulton, having been told that the economy, the spread here, in Logan County, 47% of this county depended on agriculture in one way or another.
Probably very accurate.
The picture hasn't changed much then.
It might even be a little higher than that now,
Isn't that something?
because we no longer have the state school in operation and some of those things that probably were in play then.
Were a big part of our
Yeah.
economy here, yes, and a necessary thing. But somebody got torqued with somebody, and so there was no more state school, which I think was a travesty. And I know they'd be vitally interested in how I feel about that, right?
We probably better not go there.
Maybe,
No, that's
maybe we
exactly right.
shouldn't.
Yeah, it's
well,
only
let's go into the 47%. Let's talk about agriculture. Now, we had winter noticeably this year again, and did that help water tables and so forth? Was it too much? Was it too cold? Was it not cold enough or not snowy enough? How did we come out of the winter season?
You have 3 seconds to answer all of those.
It is what it is.
It be what it be, yep.
Basically, we didn't add a lot to the water table over the winter because we really didn't have a huge amount of snow, and 10 inches of snow roughly to get an inch of water. And so it takes about 25 inches of water all season long to get a corn crop, a good one. So you get it in rain, you get it in snow melt, you get it in those winter rains, and it is what it is. And I think last year was abundantly clear: when you get it, you get the good yields to go with it.
Yeah, but now coming into spring, we've not had much by way of rain. Is that the good news or the bad news?
It's okay. We're adequate on soil and subsoil moisture in our area. You know, it's not a drought-prone area like just to our southwest is. You know, they're under no burn zones, or have been, over in southeast all the way through Iowa and into the Plain States, and everybody's seen what California's suffering, and you know, we're adequate on subsoil moisture.
But you know, John, we're so much different here in Logan County with the soil type that we have as opposed to over Menard County. There's a lot of more sandy soil and so forth. Am I correct in that? And how does that relate to retaining moisture?
Well, there's a little bit in Menard, but more as you go into Mason and Tazewell, up in that large irrigated area, and it's irrigated for a reason. It's sandy, and they need irrigation, and that gives them the opportunity for all those specialty crops, you know, all the way from popcorn, seed corn, to pumpkins, and the canning vegetables, and so forth. Sand does not hold water.
No.
But wherever there's sand, there's water close by. They're still using sand points that they drive by hand for wells over there. So it's a whole different thing. It's very shallow, the aquifer is in that area, and it's abundant right below them.
Is their water table different than ours, the level of the water table over there?
Sure, it's much shallower. They can sometimes hit house wells at 10, 12 foot.
Really? Yeah.
During the few flood years, the water table was over the top of the surface. They closed roads permanently over in some of those areas because they were always underwater.
Oh, boy.
So that shows you how shallow it is. Our municipal wells for Lincoln are in that 90 to 110 foot range, and you go west and they're 280 to 500 feet, and some places you can do 40 for irrigation wells over there. So
yesterday at the polling place, we had plenty of time to chat. And
do you girls play euchre or something there? You have so much time.
No, but anymore, everybody has an iPad or the iPhone or something. And of course, not unlike you, some of us, when we sit down with a group of people, we talk, okay? Now, but that aside, one of the subjects that we got into yesterday had to do with organic farming. And in this case, what she had been reading had to do with fruit. And I said, but the thing is, you can't have it both ways. And we're like the breadbasket of the world. And if you're going to have all organic, no herbicides, no pesticides, no nothing, we aren't going to have the size of crops that we have. And you either have a lot of food produced for the world, or you have organic, was my position, which was just the flip side of her position. I wondered if you'd weigh in on that.
Boy, that's a heavy topic. Organic is a production method, and it's very legitimate, has its intended uses, and that's human consumption. Most of the things that our local farms produce are not direct human consumption items. A lot of it goes into livestock feed and processing to make other foods, such as the corn syrups and the soybean oils and all those kinds of things. So if you're talking food for human consumption, that's the locally produced type things, the farmers market things. And unfortunately, a lot of our things in the grocery stores are coming from California, Florida, where they have the much longer growing seasons. They're working on it around here with some of the high tunnel production, the hoop buildings, those kinds of things for specialty items, but it's a whole different thing. So with the number of farmers we have, we could not do it. If you wanted to multiply the number of farmers times 40, then organic might be an option. But then it becomes personal preference to have no pesticides that are synthetically made. I won't say there's no pesticides in organic. They're allowed to use natural substances. One of them is nicotine. And that's one of the most toxic things around, but it is legal for organic. I'm not saying people use it, but you have to be a little bit knowledgeable about the term organic. If it's made from anything alive, you can use it in organic.
What in the world would you do with nicotine? Sit in your field and smoke or something?
Yeah, you can buy the concentrate, and it was very prevalent in greenhouse use, all production systems at one time. But sabadilla dust for some of the specialty insect control, it's worse than sticking your arm in the fire, but it's organic. And like I said, I'm not saying anybody uses the stuff, but you have to be a little bit knowledgeable, and there's some substitution goes on in organic with high sulfur rates for fungicide control and some of that kind of thing as well.
You mentioned nicotine. Yeah, it brings to mind marijuana. My brother always likes to kid me, some marijuana. Has the extension office put out anything at all? Because we can have people now, you're going to be able to legally grow marijuana in certain and controlled sites.
We're staying out of it, Bill.
Well, I just wondered.
We're not going to have a grower's guide or anything.
Yeah, right. No. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. You see pictures of them trimming that stuff, and we've all seen marijuana greenhouses and so forth. And as an aside, there's going to be a marijuana retail operation, as I best understand it, up in Fulton County, and Is that where Canton is? Yeah, that's Fulton County. You have to be licensed and all that. It's a kind of interesting side comment about the agricultural field.
That's specialty agriculture at the nth degree, and that's an option. And one of the whole issues, whether you're in Illinois with the medical thing or Colorado with the recreational thing, it's still against federal law. And
well, it's still a drug.
You look at there's lots of drugs out there that are legal too, but you mentioned nicotine and alcohol and go on down the list, but it's still against federal law, and even the application process says, yes, we have licensed this in the state, but it's against federal law. So.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? What do you do, just secede? Acre by acre, or can you do the whole state?
And if you look at the end intent of the thing, it is for a good purpose, and that's why they're doing it. For the medical relief of people who can't get relief in any other method, and that's the same as codeine type painkillers and some of those kinds of things, if you want to look at it that way. But that's too much into social commentary for me.
It
is beyond your ken.
I'm out of my realm.
Everything is always interrelated. You can't do this without it affecting that.
Sure.
Historically, getting back to agriculture, we've brought in from somewhere down in South America some bug that was going to alleviate the whole problem of this little pest in the fields or something. And what happens before you know it? The cure is much worse than the ailment ever was. You monkey around with Mother Nature, you're going to come out on the short end.
Yeah, some of the things we've introduced on purpose have come around to bite back. Like Asian lady beetles, kudzu, multiflora rose.
Kudzu, there's something that the people
and they've been
the
introduced for a specific purpose, but they thrived.
And then when it's all over, you can't just say oops and it goes away. You
can't throw it back.
You have to live with it.
Yeah.
John, economics aside, what would be the number one problem that Mr. and Mrs. Farmer, and I include Mrs. Farmer because she's a helpmate, the housemate on these farms, always has been. Maybe more so in the past than today because of the ways of farming and so forth. But what would be a major problem for a farmer to face, accepting the economics of the situation?
Boy, that's a tough one because the economics is number one right
now.
When we're looking at potential losses of $70 to $100 an acre, taking into account all expenses, including land rent, or if you can turn that around, and the university numbers say about $170 some in Central Illinois to pay for family living and land costs. So I hope that you're owning a fair chunk of the land you're farming, or you have lesser production expenses, because farm families don't live on $20,000 a year anymore either. It takes money to have some profit to survive through the year for the families, and so that's been one of the biggest changes, and we experienced that with the large export markets like we've experienced. They're about a 3-year blip on the radar, and then when it comes down, it usually comes down fairly heavily, and lots of reasons for that. You can point to the production, but what's happened, the dollar's gotten much stronger also, so the exchange rate for exports is not favorable now from the United States, so we've lost out on that account.
Where the poor farmer is concerned, it's just a shirky tooth. There are so many things that he has to deal with, not only nature but economies, not only here but in the whole world. He just has to have an awful lot of faith when he puts that seed in the ground, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. Not only that, but it's one of the few businesses where everybody else sets your input prices and your output price. It's not like they get to negotiate for, what their crop or livestock or whatever they produce is worth. It's pretty much a set thing offered by a processor or, a middleman in that thing, like the local elevator.
You talk about bargaining and so forth, and that made me think of the word union. And there was quite a active movement a number of years ago for unionizing, for lack of a better word. If somebody has a better word, feed it in here, please.
No, I think that's the correct word.
They had the NFO and so forth, and I haven't heard anything about that for a number of years.
Well, we're going to hear about that after we just like the farmer juggling. We juggle right here in this station, and it's time wise, and then we have to have some time for commercials and so forth. And so, while John formulating his answer about unionization of farmers, we're going to jump and unionize our. Well, maybe not that. At least we bring on the commercial, sir. Right back live in the studios here at WLCN, high on the hill at County Road 2250, 648-5510. Somebody might have a question of John Fulton. I mean, as we all know, anybody who knows John Fulton knows that he's a cornucopia of information, has anything to do with agriculture and other items as well. Now, John, Judy's question had to do with unionization, when there was an effort some long time ago to unionize some of the Logan County farmers. What can you comment about that?
Well, there were hotbeds throughout the nation. And,
yes.
It probably was a smaller effort, but one you're familiar with here. Some of the more effective ones were in the intense dairy operation areas, where they did get a fair number of dairy producers together to negotiate prices with the cheese plants and so forth. Around here there was some limited success, and it takes a lot of energy to do those kinds of things, and it's locally led in most cases, and as their energy wanes or the next generation takes over, things may not continue, and that's probably the case. And we also had some other influences, I guess, that came along about that same shortly thereafter, such as the federal crop insurance program as a safety net, and some of those things that also
legislated away some of the problems.
Well, or in a way, made it not such a hot burner issue, I guess is a good way to put it. If we had some assistance from some of the different farm programs to shore up income. We talk about $3.60 corn being cheap, and we sold a lot under $2 and used some of the subsidy programs not all that long ago. So that's kind of the era. Depressed prices bring about an increase in those movements to try and get bargaining groups together to shore up the prices.
I've always thought of the farmer as by nature being an independent person. Do you think that was part of the reason that it didn't just become a full-blown effort?
I really couldn't say, Judy, but that may have some influence on it. And others decided to get larger and integrate. We see that all the way from the large swine operations that are going, all the way. They're not selling pigs anymore. They're selling hams and bacon and chops.
Yeah.
Same thing with even like Rop Dairy up in McLean County. They're no longer selling milk. They're selling cheese and some of those things. So that's another way to capture that end point, is to be from beginning to end, fully integrated.
There are a lot of folks, John, in the listening area, who, age being what it is, things change, but they don't know that 160 acres was kind of average many, many years back, and fellow could make a living, maybe eke it out and scrape it out, but a 160 acre farm was not uncommon.
No, and you go back further and it's 40.
Yeah.
But
Right.
well, now we're back to talking the organic thing because, it required hand labor and all mechanical tillage and no use of pesticides and so forth. And you can do it, but it's much more intense.
And they all had
Yeah.
livestock.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, many butchered right on the premises there. And they'd have butchering fests. People from come around, just like the old threshing bees.
Yep.
When the separator would pull in and then come down the lane, and the farmers would come in from this farm and that farm, and they all gather up. Then we'd move to the next farm and do the whole thing. Everybody cooperating, helping them get the crops in and getting them processed.
Very true.
Now, for people like me who have absolutely no farmland, but I do have a little yard on a corner in Lincoln, and what should be my biggest concern right now? Because I do like to keep it looking half decent, Just
How about your neighbor's dog?
with my neighbor's dog?
Is that a concern?
My dog is a concern. But for the sake of the neighbors, you want your yard to look half decent, or they'll drum you out of the neighborhood. But so, what should be my big things now?
Well, if you're asking what's on the usual to-do calendar, I can't tell you, Judy, what your concerns should be.
Oh, but I need to be told, John.
Well, if you're looking at the actual lawn, we're about to the end of the spring seeding season.
Think of that, about the end of the spring season.
Yeah, but there's a spring and a fall. And
Yes.
if you're spring seeding, you're looking at mid-March through about the 1st of April. So we're about a week beyond that already. And I never say, last week you would have been okay, this week you're not. But your odds go down as you get later in the spring because hot weather.
But the
is going
seeds
to
don't
hit us.
know whether it's April 1 or April 8, do they?
Well, young plants do if it turns hot and dry
Yeah.
before they're established. That's the problem.
But what if you just have a spot? And I think that happens to everybody. Come spring, everything's starting to look real green except that one lousy little spot over there. What do you do about a spot that really needs some seeding? What's the best way to do
Well,
that?
it really depends on how big that spot is.
Let's say a foot square.
Okay, it's not a spot, it's a square. As you look at lawns, you can sprinkle a little seed over the top of that. You can cut a piece of grass out of the back corner where nobody sees it and put it there. That's going to be more surefire.
Sod.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can call it that. We called it transferring chunks, yeah. But
You always use that technical terms, don't you?
Technocrat.
But really, a spot that big, if you don't care if it's going to look like that right now, by the end of next fall, it's going to be filled in more than likely from grass encroaching from the outside edges.
So sometimes things take care of themselves.
It'll fill in about a dinner plate size in a growing season.
Oh, when we first moved down here, a friend had new construction, and of course there was no grass then. And I said, well, when are you going to get your lawn in? And they said, well, they were going to seed. I said, seed? I never heard of anybody seeding a lawn. Up north, you always buy sod, and the man comes with a truck full and rolls it out on your yard. I never heard of seeding a lawn.
Yeah.
I guess you have to have more growing season in order to seed.
Well, the sod farms do that for you. They seed it and then they cut it.
Yeah,
So,
it
yeah.
was real slick.
Yeah. It's just all in preference and cost and time savings and whether you're willing to expend the dollars to get things going about 2.5 months quicker.
Yeah. Now, if you want to put some flower seeds in, on the little package it says that you should sow these seeds in the last of March to the 1st of May. Well, that's quite a while. Can you narrow that a little bit, or give any kind
Depends
of...
on what kind of things. It doesn't matter whether it's flowers or vegetables. They break down into different categories, all the way from hardy to frost tolerant to tender to warm loving. And if they're tender or warm loving, you shouldn't be seeding them until after about May 7th or so, because that's when we have a 90% surety it's not going to frost again. If you go out and seed something that is killed by frost now, you still have about a 50-50 shot of doing it again, because it's still April.
Yeah.
We've got about another month to go to hit our frost-free date, so to speak. So, like I said, Jeff asked me the same question about sunflowers, and I said, they like it warmer, so you're going to be the first week of May. I know you have time now, but this isn't it. So you go out and you put in the garden, you would put in broccoli, cabbage, spinach, lettuce, things that are frost tolerant, just for that reason. They're going well now. But the other stuff may do well, or you may be covering it up a lot.
So you buy your seeds, you take your chances, right?
Well, it depends on what they are.
You're going to sow it now.
Some things take some frost and others don't.
Well, Judith K., there come a time when you just quit worrying about planting. I found that I can get down on my hands and knees, but I can't get up very well, so I just don't worry about planting anymore.
My down is still working. My up's a little dicey.
Let's get back to Big A, the agriculture per se. Corn. How much will it cost a farmer to get a crop in the ground? There's a cost factor out there. I know that's
ballpark, and it depends on all the different operations and so forth. But without land cost and so forth,
accepting land cost.
As you go through it on corn, you're looking, let's say, roughly at $100 nitrogen. About $100 dry fertilizer, about $125 to $50 on seed, and you start adding all those up, and you hit
That's
$3
per acre. So
per acre.
So the first thing you know, for that seed, as the seed goes in the ground, there's a significant investment.
$385, $400, somewhere around there per acre. And then you get into some of the things the U of I and the other universities throw in there that are kind of hidden costs or forgotten. You've got your machinery depreciation your insurance, your interest on borrowed money, and some of that. And so some of those numbers from the universities get up to about $425 or maybe $440 per acre.
Which makes the farmer, again, as big a gambler as those who go to the Las Vegas and roll the dice on the strip.
Who else would take a $300 bag of seed and scatter it on the ground? Well, they don't scatter it. They use an awful
what you're saying,
expensive piece of equipment to stick it in the ground, but, and hope that the weather cooperates and everything else goes okay.
Yeah, Mr. Joe and Josephine Smith, as they drive down the country road, if they get off the main highway at all, they don't have any cognizance at all of what it takes to be a farmer insofar as getting everything. Just the investment. If I were a young fella, boy, would that be great. But if I want to get into farming today and had the land, but I'd have all the equipment and so forth to acquire and buy. Of course, they don't do it all at once. They acquire little by little. But it would be a huge investment.
Most certainly. Some of the large tractors, you're looking at well over $250,000, and combines $500,000. And so some of the farmers handle more money in a year than some of the smaller banks do.
Sure, think of that. Yeah.
And it's interesting. You talk about driving down the road. There's a perception that all farms are corporate.
Yeah.
And it's simply because they see the seed corn signs or something out by the end of the road, and they assume that company owns that piece of ground rather than, you give me a half bag free for putting out the whatever sign.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
So that's where the corporate farming image comes from for a lot of folks, as they drive down that highway or interstate and see whatever brand signs or whatever fertilizer company or those kinds of things.
But you mentioned corporate farming, and there's a lot of that. And in fact, there's a lot of foreign money in corporate farming. Does that have a significant impact on the individual farmer?
Probably not at this time. We've had the in Cabrasa over to the east of us for several years.
Yeah.
And they thought they would make a big splash, and they're dealing with the same set of rules and economics that everybody else is. So they really haven't expanded since their initial.
They owned a lot of acreage or rented or whatever, but as you go towards Champaign, see those signs all over. Now, where's the ownership in that corporation? Do you know?
Brazil.
And sir?
Brazil.
Brazil.
Yes.
Interesting.
But I don't know if it's any different than it has been, and there's a lot of ownership in other countries from United States citizens and farmers as well. You know, there's folks here in Illinois now that go down to Brazil or Argentina and own ground and farm 2 seasons. So it's truly a worldwide economy in agriculture. It's one of the leading cutting-edge type things as far as economies go for pricing, supply, production, all that. No place else that has the production capacity has the infrastructure to move things like the United States. That's one of the big deals with Brazil and other South American countries. They can raise it, but they don't have the roads, the railroads, the ports, all that stuff, you know. It's kind of like shipping food to some of the African countries for relief. It's okay, you can get it there, but then you got to unload the 100-pound sacks and put them on your shoulder almost type thing. And it's not quite that bad, but in some areas it actually could be in South America. So
and that's another thing that the average person, as they drive down the highway and through the fields, they don't realize how much of the crop that they're seeing harvested is going to be exported.
And in our area, a lot of it is processed just because of our location and having ADM on the back door. That's one of the prime bids in our area. And then we also have river access for export. So we profit from the export markets, but we have kind of the ace in the hole with our Decatur and Peoria, Pekin area processors as well. So our market will be better in some of the down years, but it's still hard to beat being along the Mississippi somewhere, whether you're in the western Illinois, Iowa, or all the way down to the Gulf. You know, that's cheaper transportation. The closer you are to the end point, the cheaper the transportation, so the farmers get to keep some more of that.
Right. And it all has to be transported. It isn't going to do you any good if you can't transport it.
That's
John,
true.
do you have a feel at this point in time here on the calendar as to what our Logan County farmers may be doing insofar as planting corn versus soybeans? There's been some comment about, because of the last year's production, that some folks may not grow as much corn this year and they may switch to soybeans. What's
year in and year out, that's a slow change throughout central Illinois. The plans were made last fall, and I'm not saying soybeans weren't possibly dollar advantageous even the past 2 or 3 years when you looked at it. We probably wouldn't have guessed 230 bushel corn when you were figuring out those bottom numbers. But we may see some slight switching, but we're going to be about 60% corn. I can tell you that. We have livestock operations that are going to be intense corn. We have The seed industry is set up, from some of our production plants, and so it's going to remain that. Logan County's always been a heavy corn area.
You mentioned livestock in, quote, again, the old, quote, olden days. When there was livestock on the farm, they had their own in-house fertilizer. And they just used a manure spreader, and that was their fertilization. And now fertilizer costs a lot of money.
Yeah, and some of the people raising livestock and still having the in-house fertilizer would say that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, right. Lost a lot of money going in with the corn price.
Yeah, they were losing money, but that was their saving grace, was being able to spread it back over the field. But yeah, the input costs are high. They've come down a little bit, but there's a trend when market prices are high and income's high. People get a larger share of it all along the way, from the seed, the fuel prices, the fertilizers, the chemicals, all those things go up as well. And as the income comes down, those things slowly follow, and the demand for fertilizer might be slightly less this year because people are going to cut back because they don't have the free dollars.
Is there ever any fluctuation in the price of machinery?
Sure. When there's a glut on the market. Right now, the large machinery orders of new ones have greatly slowed. The small estate and lawn and garden equipment is booming because everybody needs a lawnmower, but not everybody needs a 200-horse tractor. So it's interesting, and you've probably seen all the info about John Deere and all the other companies laying off production employees for that very reason, because it's kind of like the auto industry. They make their money on the big ones and the SUVs and the pickup trucks, and then as everybody downsizes, things get to hurting.
Yeah, right.
One final quick question, John. As far as equipment's concerned, we're seeing more and more what I call the rubber-tired Caterpillar tractors out in the field.
Those tractors.
Yeah, tri-tractors, right? Mm-hmm. Impaction on the soil and so forth. Is there anything about that? Must not do any damage at all, because they're sure becoming more and more important.
Well, when you get into compaction, it's just pounds per square inch. And how much of that tire compacts the ground versus that flat track?
Big flat track,
tractor. Plus, they're able to go in more questionable circumstances to pull things out of the field in the fall and so forth. Better traction because you have more surface area contacted. So that's a large reason for the popularity.
A long way from the old GI case that my granddad had with great big steel lugs wheels.
Yeah.
John Fulton, we appreciate once again, John. You take time out. You're a busy guy. You're serving 3 counties in your profession, serving agriculture. We thank you, John, for coming over and spending that time with us. I found one quote about agriculture, and it probably pretty much hits the mark. The discovery of agriculture was the first step towards a civilized life. Well, there may be something to that. John Fulton, thank you very, very much for coming.
Thank you.